My kids wouldn't do it. They'd go round to Rishi Sunak's house and service him.
And now we're being told that, we need to become even more nationalistic and fight for king of the country. And it's for what purposes? To fuel further capitalist exploitations and genocide. It's like, what?
For centuries, there have been terrible, destructive wars of people willing to die for their country. And we have got to find a different way of settling our affairs.
I think it's pretty silly.
So over the weekend, Rishi Sunak announced his plans to reintroduce national service for 18-year-olds. What are your thoughts on that?
It's just a contemptible piece of nonsense.
My kids wouldn't do it. They'd go round to Rishi Sunak's house and service him.
Well, because it's a gimmick. He's trying to attract the right wingers that have gone off to the so-called Reform Party. It will be uncosted, it will be unthought through, it will be a disaster. Because as well as everything else, as well as being inhuman, lacking in compassion, they are lacking in basic competence.
It just seems to feel like we're going backwards in a way. It seems to be back to old ways, and I think we really should be moving forward. And
The 18-year-olds I know and the teenagers and young adults I know are absolutely invested in public service and good-spirited work. I mean, the idea that they need to be licked into shape by going into the army for 12 months is ridiculous.
Would you die for this country?
Would I die for it?
Yes.
No.
Why do you say no?
Well, because for centuries there have been terrible, destructive wars of people willing to die for their country. And we have got to find a different way of settling our affairs. At the moment, there are disastrous wars happening in Gaza and in Ukraine, in Sudan, and it's abundantly clear that force does not resolve anything. It just causes a whole lot more destruction. So no, I would not be prepared to fight or die for my country.
I can only assume the reason that he's putting these things forward is because he thinks that these are things that will help him get re-elected at this point.
I think it's a gimmick to try and win votes. Some focus groups told him about that, but it's not workable. And what would the sanctions be to not join the national service, right? They've said there's not going to be any.
First of all, the narrative is that 18-year-olds have nothing better to do, they don't contribute, and therefore they need to be told what to do. I mean, but society has changed a long time since the 60s when national service was part of life. And to announce it now, just after he's announced an election, shows it's the political stunt that it is. Has he consulted any 18-year-olds? I think it's ridiculous.
If I'm honest, I'm quite happy about it. But for 3 reasons, he's got it wrong. Number one, the incentives are just terrible. We don't really know what the incentives are. What he should do is, instead of paying people, he should perhaps consider paying a percentage of their university costs or some form of further education in the future if they want to be retrained. Number 2, it shouldn't be mandatory. That's total bollocks. If you want to incentivize people to get behind the national image or have some form of national identity, it shouldn't be done like forcing it down their throats, And number 3, I think it should be from the ages of 14 to 24, 10 years worth, and as I say, it should be completely voluntary. If the incentives were better, if it weren't forced down our throats, and if it were done over a longer time span, I would be more in favour. But for that reason, there's no way that I'm seeing it as a positive policy.
I think you've just described the Duke of Edinburgh's award.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't pay for my university costs, does it? And I think if we were if we were going to introduce that, then you'd get all of the taxpayers off the government's backs about paying for university costs. You get young people on side because it's a huge amount of their money, and you'd get people behind local industries, local problems, and local communities. It'd be much, much better than this jingoistic idea of national identity and getting young people out of their bubble. What bubble, right? The housing bubble,
Why do you think he's making this call?
Because he's desperate to pander to the ancient ones who are supposed to be conservative. I'm 68, I've never voted for Conservative. It's just a delusion he has that if he does that, all the Conservatives will come out and say, yeah, we're on to something, let's do hanging as well. He's just gone full fat. And he knows he's going to lose. they're putting in the other, what did they call it, a unionist coalition? Or no, a unionist regime. That's what they're calling it. It'll still be a unionist regime as far as they're concerned. I think he's gone early because he's scared of Kate Forbesism, which is even more far right than they are. I think he's done that, and he's seen it coming. He knows he'll lose Scotland, and Scotland's the cash cow. And basically, it pays for England, and all there's territorial squabbles and wars and waving their penis-shaped missiles around, and Scotland pays for all that, and they're going to lose it.
Young people at the moment seem to be getting a bit of a raw deal. Like the 18-year-olds now, they went to school during the pandemic, and now they're being forced to join the army.
Yeah, they're kind of getting shafted, aren't they? I mean, the Tories have been shafting us for what, last 15 years, 10, 15 years now. So I think it's more of the same. I think it's a bad idea.
And how many more times do we need to be invalidated for our experiences of complaining about this country? It's just completely appalling. And now we're being told that we need to become even more nationalistic and fight for king of the country, and it's for what purposes? To fuel further capitalist exploitations and genocide. It's like, what? Crazy.
Would you die for this country?
I can't think of that on the spot. I don't know, right? I mean, for my family, yes, but for its political goals, particularly overseas political goals, no.
Would you die for this country?
Depends under what circumstances, but probably not.
My gut says no.
Why do you think Sunak has done this? Why do you think he's called for this policy?
To get people like my dad, who's in his 60s, on side. I mean, that's the same thing with the triple lock plus pensions, right? It's to make sure to get the nationalists on side, to get the elder people on side, so that they can at least pummel the younger people.
I'd feel angry. I'd feel angry that I was being cast as someone who needs to be told how to behave. And I see that obviously Ross, what's his first name, up here has had to justify that by saying it's going to help the homeless. Now, I deal with the homeless on a regular basis. If it's going to be 1 weekend, 2 weekends a month, how's that going to help a homeless person? It's just nonsense. It's a nonsense policy.
Joe, how are you feeling about the general election?
Well, it's about time, isn't it? It's long, long, long overdue, so thank goodness it's happening.
Yes. What are your hopes for it?
Well, I hope that the Tories get wiped out. They've done so much damage to the country. They have no plans for the future, and it's time they went.